Hello and welcome to another episode of Creating Cultures that Outperform. I'm Frank Wander and I'm here with my wonderful co-host Terry Mays. So today we're going to be talking about lead from anywhere. This is an incredibly important skill. The minute the world went to remote and hybrid work, leaders had to learn new skills or discover the fact that they were missing skills even in a workplace, a work from the office environment. And that's what in fact has happened. We see that people are not as connected as they used to be. And leaders have to actually consciously think about how they're going to connect, integrate, and make everybody feel a sense of belonging, regardless of what their work style is. So we're in that new world of work. We're going to talk about what you need to do as a leader to lead from anywhere. This is very important. And before we get going, quick intro from Terry.
Hello, I'm Terry Mays, a certified culture engineer with emphasis on helping companies bring out the best in their people.
And I'm Frank Wander. I'm the founder and CEO of People Productive, a company that helps organizations use the time, talent, energy of their people most effectively so that they do, in fact, end up with a culture that outperforms. So this is all about the human infrastructure, the human side of business. How do you create a culture where people are really motivated and able to give their best? You got to use their time, talent, energy wisely. You got to meet their emotional needs. Today, we're going to talk about really meeting the emotional needs of the people. This is something that did not happen in many cases, even when they were in the office. And I think many emotional needs got met by the people that were sitting in the cube next to them. They felt a little more connected to the organization. But now that you take that away in the remote, the fact that the boss wasn't consciously making them part of the fabric, that emotional fabric of the organization, makes them feel disconnected. And, they've done studies very, very recently where they track people, they track the level of kind of connectedness before the pandemic and now afterwards. People who had strong connections to the organization before it went remote, well, they managed to keep them because they already had relationships from the people sitting, in the cube next to them, people they used to hang out with. But people who were hired since the pandemic, who've been remote the whole time, they're disconnected. They're not having the same social experience as these people who've been in the company. So what must leaders do to solve that? Let's talk about it, Tara.
Yeah, that it's difficult to have someone really understand the vibe in an organization when you're remote, right? So vibe, it's something that you catch in the atmosphere. You just catch it,
Yeah,
you feel it from the people that you're talking to.
so
But
true.
one thing that's really nice about vibe is it is transferable. So you can get a vibe over video cameras. And
Yeah,
so actually Frank and I met for the first time over Zoom.
that's
So
right.
we didn't really develop our relationship in person. Our relationship developed over Zoom. And by the time we finally met up in person, it was just like, oh, I've known him all my life.
Yeah,
And it
it
had
did feel
this
that way.
between us.
When we
Yeah.
came down to Alabama, it absolutely felt that way. It's like we were old friends already,
Yes.
you know?
Absolutely. So it can be done. You just have to be intentional. You have to
Yeah,
really be your authentic self. You have to make sure that you're open and you're transparent, you're honest.
yep.
And one thing that I really see about this being able to lead from everywhere is being able to be comfortable with who you are. So you get a lot of actually it's a little bit easier from my perspective. It's a little bit easier to be comfortable because you get out of the face-to-face interaction that's in person, but you do that same kind of interaction in a virtual setting. You get some luxuries that you don't get in person. So I
Yeah.
can mute myself. I can take my camera off and put it back on. There are things that you can do in a virtual setting that if I were standing face to face, I can't do that. Right. So I've got to be kind of on all the time. But the luxury of being virtual is you get some of those abilities that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to do. But learning how to be comfortable with who you are and self-aware, I think helps you in that ability to lead and make connections with people.
Oh, it's super important. And leaders absolutely have to think about this consciously. They've got to understand that somebody's come in and they've got to weave them into the fabric of the organization, and they've got to have real practices that they're employing to do this. It's not going to happen organically as easily as it used to in the past.
Right.
So, first of all, when the people are starting, you want to make it a very welcoming experience for them. Part of the connection is that initial meeting. People really want to know who the new person is. There's heightened interest in who this individual is that's joining the team. It's a great opportunity to have them share some things about themselves, to have team members start to share things about themselves, to welcome them on board, to actually go out of your way to say, hey, I want you to have virtual coffee with each member of the team, get to know them, and give them some questions. Give me, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? You can ask just something as simple as that and keep digging deeper. It actually works. That is an exercise for building connectedness. Sounds silly, but it's a very simple question. But then people start to tell you who they are.
Yeah.
It's important for each person to share who they are, not just a new person, because they've got to know something about you. This is how you create empathy with one another. People start to find your humanity, who you are, the struggles you had in life. They can connect to different parts of you, and they start to have a lot more respect for you. They just start to have a warmth about who you are.
Yeah.
And warmth is a vibe, and that comes across. And these are things that you've got to do intentionally. You've got to make it happen. And you've got to continue to work on team building in a remote work world and take those office, hybrid, and pure remote workers and bring them together in lots of different ways, different circumstances. This is what matters. It can be done, and you've got to build expertise in this area. No question.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to bring people together. I think you make a great point. And some companies during the pandemic, I discovered that there are quite a few companies that have just mastered the art of doing a virtual happy hour or a virtual
Yeah.
Christmas parties. All of those things had to happen during the pandemic. And so we couldn't come together in person, but people were joining. Like I joined a social activity for one of the local tech organizations, and they had a DJ, or not a DJ, I'm sorry, a mixologist come in,
Nice.
and they gave you kind of the ingredients list so you could go out and figure out whichever drinks that he was going to be making. But he explained the history behind the drinks. He was making the drinks live and in person. So even if you're not a drinker, you still could participate in the activity and enjoy the discussion. So you
Yeah.
had that and then they sent you like a little sample box of some of the beverages that you could, like the liquor basically.
Yeah.
So you could mix it up yourself. But, it was all about building that connection with people. And so then you had this live demonstration with all of the ingredients and instructions. You could ask questions. He was giving you history. So it was a nice interactive experience. And then I attended another event where it was like a virtual escape room. You had to answer questions to get out of the virtual escape room
Yeah.
to get to the
Interesting.
next level. So there are ways to do it. I've been on ones where they have people come in and they write
Yeah.
songs based on your organization. So you give them different keywords and they start spitting out these songs, and then they do covers of other songs. So it's just
Yeah.
fun.
Fun
But you
stuff.
have to be intentional about interacting with people much more than you do when you're in person. And that's kind of the whole point of it all. It's just being intentional about it. Make sure that you're establishing those relationships with people right out the gate, especially when they're new in the organization. And even for folks that have been around for a while, sometimes, and I shouldn't even say sometimes, all the time, there's something more that you can learn about somebody, even if you've been with that person for 30 years. You hear husband and wife all the time say, I never knew that about you. And they've been married for like 50 years. So there's always something new to learn. And the more you peel back the layers of the onion, you start to see that people are just people and we're all really the same. When you start looking at it at the bottom line, we're all just people. So we have things in common. There are people that you think, I have nothing in common with them. But I bet if you had a conversation, enough time spent with them, you would discover that, oh, hey, I do have something in common with this person. But you have to be intentional about finding it.
Yeah, it's likely if they spend enough time together, I agree with you, that they're going to find some overlap, somewhere through somebody, somehow, it's going to happen. And, I think that leaders in this day and age, because human complexity is even greater than it was in the past, given the different ways of working together, It's important to measure your culture. You really do have to measure it. You've got to understand where there are gaps in the culture, where the human experience may not be up to speed. Look at the levels of belonging at different parts of the organization. Try to make sure leaders who have a lower level of belonging are absolutely working on improving it. They're tasked with making it better. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. You've got to measure this stuff. And then people have to be tasked with building skills in these areas where there are gaps. I think it's more important than ever. It was always important, but you got to measure culture, not just engagement. You've got to look at the culture. How is the culture operating? How is it performing? Are the people who are remote having a good work experience, not just a good emotional experience? Are they equipped properly? They have all the right tools. Are they jumping over more hurdles than the people who are in the office? So you could see the different levels of enablement around the organization, make sure it's equal for everybody. All of these things matter, and they lead to a great experience, and they allow you to actually lead from anywhere in a very measurable way so that you can repeat it. You can ensure there's a great experience. And the fact they're measurements and you share them with people, it lets them know that you care, that you really do care enough to measure it, because you're investing in the future of those people in that organization. And that's a sign that you care about them and their success. And when you take action on this stuff, they start to feel better about it. Now they're going to be more likely to share things that really are bothering them. And you can start to ask those coaching questions. A year from now, what would you like to have learned that you don't know now? What are the things that we can remove that are in the way of you being the most effective person you can be here in the workplace? And you can start to ask questions like that. And as everybody asks questions like that, when you do the next culture assessment, you have some questions, you're going to get really good input, because they're used to giving answers to questions because they know people are going to take action. And that's what matters. So this
Yeah.
stuff's really important. And I think companies could do a much better job than they're doing in these dimensions, because they'll start to learn and understand what are these human emotional needs and enabling needs. How can we meet them? Let's meet them intentionally. And let's just continuously improve the experience of all the people here.
That's right. There's nothing worse than going through and taking all the steps to measure your culture and then doing nothing about it.
Oh,
So year after
worse.
year, doing those engagement surveys year after year, but not doing anything to change, people ultimately tune you out. And so
Yeah.
you'll start to see that people will not even complete the survey. They're so
Yeah.
disengaged that they're just like, whatever. Nobody's really reading it. Nobody really cares. They're just doing it to say that they did it and
Yep.
not because they really care about it. But once you have people that are focused on it, and this is a real investment of resources, right? So
Yeah.
if you really want to reap a harvest in this area, you got to invest in it. You can't just have it be secondary on or tertiary on somebody's plate.
Yeah.
It's got to be front and center as somebody's responsibility, that people are intentionally, actively trying to make a difference in the culture in the organization. It
Yeah.
can't be a side job. It can't be something that's just, we'll get to it when we get to it. Somebody has to focus on it, and it's a full-time job to do that.
It is a full-time job, and it's worth it when you look at the cost of turnover. How often it's an annual salary or multiples of it, depending on the role and the complexity of the job and how long it takes to become part of the fabric of the organization, how long it takes to learn the role, called time to competency. These add enormous costs to onboarding somebody getting fully up to speed. So the cost of turnover is huge. You've got to do this stuff. You want to keep good people. You want to hire great people and keep them, make them part of the team. Nothing matters more in this era of hybrid work, I'll tell you.
Right. And you make a great point. Either you're investing in building your culture, measuring and improving, or you're investing in turnover
That's right.
and
Yeah.
constantly bringing people in. Either
Balance.
way, you're going to make the investment. So why not invest in the best possible outcomes by investing in your people and in your culture and making sure that you're taking those active steps to make the culture better so that people want to stay. You want to make it a place that's sticky. I like to say sticky. That
Sticky. I like it.
it's, you make that place so sticky
Sticky
that
workplace.
even if I want to leave, I'm so stuck to the people and to the organization and to the goals and the vision of the company. I believe in it so deeply that it's hard for me to separate. Not that I won't ever do it, because just because you have a great culture, it doesn't mean people won't leave ever. But it definitely makes it much more harder to leave that kind of a company than one where the culture is just not that great. You don't have
Yeah,
that much connection to the people. So you're just like, nobody would care if I was gone or not. If you
yeah.
feel like that, then it's easy to leave.
Yeah, and there's a background turnover rate in every company that is whatever that stable turnover rate is. People who are relocating, people who decided they're going to change your career because they were in the wrong one. You're going to lose them, and that's all positive, right? Because there's certain people do need to move on at different times of their life, but you don't want to lose the people who really weren't planning on moving. So,
Right.
background turnover rates probably, just 2-3%, quite honestly, in a really good culture. At least that's what I achieved where I worked. Very
Yeah.
few, very little turnover, but turnover where you could be happy for the person who was leaving. And they were sad to go, but they had to go.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right.
No?
All right.
We should
So,
probably get to those key takeaways, huh?
yes, that's what I was just about to say.
Uh,
I think this has been a really good discussion.
yeah, I do too.
So here are some tips for how to lead from anywhere. This can be done virtually. There was a little bit of apprehension when we all started leaving the office, going to virtual settings. But I think over the time that we've been here in these virtual spaces, we've realized that you can be as productive virtually as you are in person. It
Mhm.
takes a little bit of effort with some things, but it can be done. So here's some ways that you can lead from anywhere. And first off, don't think about remote workers as just being distant. Think about them as employees that maybe you're not in the same location, but you can still make a physical an emotional connection with that person. So you may not be able to be physically present with them, but you can make connections with people
Mhm.
that transcend being in that same physical space. So very similar to the way Frank and I connected. We were able to work together very well
Yeah,
remotely. And we did that for more than a year
worked
before,
out great. Yes.
and it worked well. So you can do it. You just have to be intentional about it and prioritize being intentional about make connecting
Yeah.
people with others. So when you've Frank talked about this before about onboarding new people, you want to connect them with the right people. You want to make sure that they have the resources and the support that they need. You want to connect them to the right team members, make sure you introduce them to everyone so that people aren't wondering, who's that person,
Mhm.
but make them feel like they're a welcome addition to the team. And just with basic introductions, make sure that you share information about yourself and allow that person to share information about themselves. And this is a way to help them make some connections in the team. You want to make sure that you're doing that so that people know each other. That makes such a difference when you know that you can count on somebody, you know what their strengths are, hey, I can go ask this person this question, or they know where to go and get the information even if they don't know the answer. Like
Mhm.
having people around like that and that are supportive and welcoming, it's huge. It's especially important when you have brand new people coming into the organization. But
Huge.
overall, it's just it's huge. I can't say it enough.
Mhm.
Building that welcoming culture, giving those shout outs and kudos when people do a great job, when they do something well, let them know.
Yeah.
And these days, we've got Teams and other social media sites that you can use, but take every advantage to publicly praise people, catch them doing something good, and then tell the world about it.
Oh,
Make
don't let them be out of sight, out of mind. That's the
That's
worst possible outcome, right? Make sure you
that's
know what
right.
they're doing and give them the shout outs when it's deserved.
Yes, absolutely. And then, last but not least, measure your culture. You want to know where you stand and create belonging for everyone. We did a whole series on this topic of belonging. So make sure you check that out. But you want to measure your culture and you want to be serious about it and show your level of seriousness by your dedication of resources. So you're going to dedicate people resources, you're going to dedicate money and time to this. You're not just going to say, "Oh, we'll get to it." But no, you have a dedicated team that's
Mhm.
really focused on how they can measure and improve the culture in your organization. And what's so wonderful is you can get some of these folks that are certified culture engineers to help you with
Yes.
this. And so make sure you're taking those steps, find those folks. And what's cool is you can find people like myself. I was just good at this naturally great at relationship
Definitely
building,
gifted at it.
had nothing to do with formal training. As a result of the work that I did, I was able to get that designation as, certified culture engineer. You've got people in your organization that are already good at this. Give them the opportunity to do it. Free them up of some of their other work so that they can focus on the things that they're naturally gifted at. Because
Mhm.
what happens is now it's not a job anymore. It's not a task. It's not this, labor that you've just, oh my God, we've got to measure the culture. Oh my God, we've got to do
Yeah,
something about it. That means you've got the wrong people working on it, if that's how they feel about it. But you've got to get the right people
you
that
do.
have some enthusiasm about it, that are excited to do it. That's when you'll see the best bang for your buck. That's
Yeah.
when you'll see the biggest improvements, when you have people that are excited about it, that can share their passion and excitement with others. So now when they're thinking about team building activities, they're not thinking, well, what's the bare minimums? What's the least cost effective thing we can do, and actually say, check the box that we had an event. But you've got somebody that's thinking about, hey, how can we do something that's really fun? We want to engage the team. What are some of the things? And they're researching and they're talking to people. They're really going out of their way to
Mhm.
find a really good activity, as opposed to, well, can we just go to the restaurant and all sit down and eat?
Mhm.
It's the level of passion that you bring to it that translates over. People receive that. Again, it's that vibe. So what vibe do you bring when you're talking about engagement and improving culture?
Mhm.
Are you just kind of like, oh, this is something we've got to do? Or are you excited about it? Because the people pick up on that and they're going to feel about it the way the leader feels about it,
Yeah.
or they're going to be bothered but that their leader feels about it a certain way. So make sure you're being excited about it, that you get the right people working on culture. You don't want to get the
You
the
want
least
people who
witty
love it.
person in the office to work on culture.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you pick the right folks to do it, but it has to be a real focused effort. It can't
Yeah.
just be something that you do it whenever you have time. It has to be something that's center stage and focused effort.
Mhm.
So your move is to schedule a virtual coffee break with your team. And if you don't drink coffee, that's just a term for having a break with your fellow coworkers, and share some fun facts. We on one of the teams that I was on, my manager was overseas, and we had several people here. I was in Alabama, and we had people all across the Northeast. And so one of the fun things we did was we put slides together that gave a little bit of our background, and then we shared a picture of the celebrity that we most look like. So you share all these pictures, and this was years and years ago. I'm telling my age, but long before there was this video capability in meetings. And so you would email everybody your information and you'd say, hey, I've been most told that I look like this person, and then you send a picture of yourself and what you really look like. And so in those virtual settings before you had cameras, you didn't really know what people look like. And I actually worked in a virtual
That's really
setting
true. You didn't.
about 10 years. I worked virtually when, long before Teams or in Zoom or any of that was a thing.
Yeah.
So we had to find other ways to be creative and connect with each other. And so we did it through email exchanges and through this instant messaging. We did have that capability. So you could share information that way.
Yeah.
But you just have to really, really think about it and do things that matter, not just checkbox activities.
Yeah. And make it fun. Fun really
Make it
connects
fun.
people in a very, very deep way. So the more
Yes,
fun you have, the more fun you make it on the team, the better off you're going to be.
right.
Well, listen, as you know, we're here every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. Every week we do a show on a different topic. Next week we're going to be covering self-handicapping, why people do it, what it means, how do you spot it, why you should know this. It's an important topic as a leader. get you to understand your people, some of the ways they regulate their own behavior. And once you know it and can spot it, then you can help them to not do it. Because actually, it's in a workplace, it's not helping them. Anyway, you'll find out what self-handicapping is. And tune in Wednesday, 3 o'clock. We'll be here for another, episode on creating cultures that outperform. So, hey, thanks for coming.
Yes. Bye for now.